The morning light filtered through the crystal domes of Zentara Prime as Ambassador David Reed adjusted his simple black suit and walked toward the towering Confederation Assembly Hall. Around him, beings from dozens of worlds moved with purpose and arrogance that had taken him years to understand. The Draknari delegation slithered past in their ceremonial armor, their reptilian eyes showing barely concealed contempt for anything that walked on two legs and breathed oxygen. The ethereals floated by in their shimmering forms, their crystalline bodies catching the light as they communicated through harmonic frequencies that made Reed's teeth ache. Reed had been humanity's representative to the Stellar Confederation for 8 years now, and he still remembered his first day when the Draknari High Commander had looked down at him and asked if humans were certain they were ready for civilized society. The question had not been meant as an insult, merely curiosity about whether a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago could truly understand the complexities of galactic politics. Inside the Great Hall, Reed took his assigned seat in what the other species politely called the Developing Worlds section. The irony was not lost on him that humanity, despite controlling 17 star systems and maintaining trade relationships across half the galaxy, was still considered a junior member of the Confederation. The Draknari controlled 43 systems. The ethereals claimed 67. Even the gas-dwelling Vorthak, who could barely communicate with oxygen-breathing species, held more political weight than humanity. The session began with typical bureaucratic efficiency as Chancellor Mordak, a towering Draknari with scars that spoke of a violent youth, called for reports on mining operations in the Kepler sector. Reed listened as various species argued over extraction rights and trade routes, each delegation speaking with the confidence of beings who had ruled the stars for millennia. The Draknari wanted exclusive rights to rare minerals. The ethereals demanded protection for their crystal farms. The Vorthak insisted their gas harvesting operations took priority over all other activities. When the discussion turned to labor shortages, Councillor Zephron of the Ethereals made an offhand comment that made several delegates chuckle. Perhaps we should employ more humans for the dangerous work. They seem well suited for tasks that require expendable workers. The comment drew approving nods from other species, and Reed noticed how naturally they all assumed humans would be grateful for such opportunities. Reed raised his hand to speak, a gesture that caused a brief pause in the proceedings. Honorable delegates, humanity would be happy to assist with labor needs, but perhaps we might consider automated solutions. That would be safer for all involved workers. His suggestion was met with polite but dismissive murmurs. Chancellor Mordak thanked him for the input, but explained that the Confederation had tried automation before, and biological workers were simply more adaptable and cost-effective. The next item on the agenda involved territorial disputes between the Nexari Empire and several border worlds. Reed felt his chest tighten as reports detailed Nexari raids on peaceful colonies, but the other delegates discussed the situation with academic detachment. The Draknari representative suggested that the affected species should simply pay tribute to avoid further attacks. The ethereals proposed establishing a buffer zone and abandoning the contested worlds entirely, when Reed suggested that the Confederation should take a stronger stance against unprovoked aggression. His words were met with patient smiles and explanations about the realities of galactic politics. Councillor Vextar, an elderly Draknari with golden scales that marked him as nobility, turned to Reed with something approaching fatherly concern. Young David, your species is still learning how things work out here. The Nexari are not like, the small conflicts you might have experienced on your homeworld. They are apex predators who have conquered 17 civilizations. The wisest course is always to avoid confrontation with superior forces. Reed nodded politely and made notes on his tablet, but he also activated a small recording device hidden in his jacket. Everything said in these chambers was officially recorded, but Reed kept his own copies for reports that went to very different recipients than his standard diplomatic summaries. During the lunch break, Reed found himself in conversation with Ambassador Yelnara of the peaceful Valdrian Collective. The cat-like being had always been kind to him, perhaps because her own species was also considered weak by Confederation standards. She spoke quietly about her concerns regarding Nexari expansion, noting that their raids were becoming bolder and more frequent. "I fear they are testing our responses," she said, her large eyes reflecting worry that her government would never admit publicly. "Each time we do nothing, they push a little further." Reed agreed with her assessment, but kept his thoughts to himself about what humanity might do if the Nexari ever turned their attention toward human space. The afternoon session focused on trade regulations and shipping lanes, topics that allowed Reed to demonstrate humanity's growing economic influence without seeming threatening. He provided detailed reports on human agricultural exports and manufacturing capabilities, information that the other species received with mild interest. To them, humans were useful suppliers of food and basic goods, nothing more. As the day's session concluded, Reed gathered his materials and prepared for his evening ritual. Every night, he would return to the human embassy and compile a detailed report that would be transmitted to Earth through heavily encrypted channels. These reports contained far more than diplomatic observations. They included detailed scans of alien technologies, behavioral analysis of other species' military capabilities, and most importantly, assessments of potential threats to human space. Walking. Back through the crystal streets of Zentara Prime, Reed passed monuments to the great civilizations that had built the Confederation. Statues of heroic Draknari warriors, crystalline structures honoring ethereal philosophers, and floating memorials to Vorthak explorers who had mapped the galactic core. Nowhere in this grand display of galactic history was there any mention of humanity, despite the fact that humans had quietly established themselves as one of the most efficient and productive species in Confederation space. That night, as Reed composed his report, he included a note that would be buried deep in classified files on Earth. Status quo maintained. Confederation continues to view humanity as harmless junior partners. Recommend continued policy of strategic underestimation. Our true capabilities remain undetected. He sealed the transmission and sent it toward Sol, knowing that somewhere, in the darkness between stars, other human ships were carrying very different cargo than the trade goods listed in their official manifests. 3 weeks after the Confederation Council had dismissed the Nexari threat as a manageable border dispute, Captain Lisa Williams received an emergency transmission that would change the course of galactic history. She had been conducting routine patrol operations along the edge of human space when her communications officer reported an incoming distress signal from the Valdrian system nearly 40 light-years away. The message was fragmented and filled with static, but the words that came through made Williams' blood run cold. "This is Valdrian Defense Command. Under attack. Nexari fleet. Requesting immediate assistance. They're not taking prisoners. They're killing everyone." The transmission cut to silence, leaving Williams and her crew staring at their instruments in growing horror. Williams commanded the patrol vessel Horizon's Edge, a ship that most alien species would classify as a lightly armed explorer. Her crew of 43 had spent the last 2 years mapping star systems and conducting what appeared to be routine scientific surveys. The other species they encountered during their missions always seemed pleased to meet such peaceful and curious humans, never suspecting that every scientific survey included detailed analysis of planetary defenses and military installations. The next transmission came from Ambassador David Reed on Zentara Prime, and his usually calm voice carried an edge that Williams had never heard before. All human vessels are to maintain current positions and observe strict communication protocols. Any ship that witnesses Nexari military action should document everything, but take no independent action without direct authorization from Earth Command. Williams ordered her ship toward the Valdrian system, knowing that by the time they arrived, whatever was happening would likely be over. The journey took 18 hours at maximum speed, and during that time, scattered reports began filtering through Confederation channels. The Nexari had not sent raiders this time. They had sent a full battle fleet with the apparent intention of completely destroying the Valdrian civilization. When the Horizon's Edge dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valdrian system, Williams and her crew witnessed a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The beautiful blue-green world that had once been home to 6 billion peaceful beings was now a smoking ruin. The Nexari fleet had used plasma bombardment to burn away every trace of Valdrian civilization, turning cities into glass and forests into ash. Lieutenant Tom Park, Williams's tactical officer, ran sensor sweeps of the devastation while trying to maintain his professional composure. "Captain, I'm detecting no life signs on the surface. The atmosphere has been poisoned with industrial toxins. Even if anyone survived the initial bombardment, they won't last long breathing that air." His voice cracked slightly as he added, "There were children down there." The Nexari fleet was still in orbit, and Williams watched through her ship's sensors as they methodically destroyed anything that might have survived their attack. They weren't content with merely conquering the Valdrians. They were erasing every trace that the species had ever existed. Ancient libraries, cultural monuments, even the orbital gardens that the Valdrians had maintained for centuries were all being systematically destroyed. Williams activated her ship's most secure communication channel and sent a coded message that she had hoped never to use. "Earth Command, this is Horizon's Edge, requesting immediate authorization for Protocol 7. The Nexari have committed complete genocide against the Valdrian Collective. They are still in system and continuing operations." She paused, knowing that her next words would cross a line from which there could be no return. "Captain's assessment. This is not a raid or territorial expansion. This is extermination warfare." The response from Admiral Tom Walsh on Earth came back faster than Williams had expected, considering the message had to travel across nearly half the galaxy. "Protocol 7 authorized. Captain Williams, you are to document everything and transmit all sensor data to the coordinates in your sealed orders. Take no action until you receive further instructions. God help us all." Williams had never opened her sealed orders, but every human ship captain carried them. As she broke the encryption codes, she found detailed instructions for scenarios that she had hoped would never occur. Protocol 7 was not just about defending human space. It was about revealing capabilities that humanity had spent 50 years hiding from the rest of the galaxy. Over the next 6 hours, Williams watched as 2 more Nexari fleets arrived in the Valdrian system. They brought construction ships that began building permanent bases on the dead world, clearly intending to use it as a staging area for further expansion. Through long-range sensors, Williams observed the methodical way they worked, treating the extermination of an entire civilization as routine business. The final transmission that Williams received that day came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Reed, broadcasting on an open channel from Zentara Prime, was addressing the Confederation Council with a speech that would be remembered across the galaxy. "Honorable delegates, humanity formally requests permission to deploy our full military capabilities in response to the Nexari threat. We believe that immediate action is necessary to prevent further genocide." Williams listened as the other species responded with their usual diplomatic caution. The Draknari representative suggested that humanity's limited experience with warfare made them unsuitable for such a serious conflict. The Ethereals proposed forming a study committee to examine the situation more carefully. Even the Vorthak, who had no direct conflict with the Nexari, suggested that hasty action might only make the situation worse. Reed's final words carried across the galaxy with quiet determination. The Stellar Confederation has made its position clear. Humanity will remember this day and act accordingly. The transmission ended, and Williams knew that everything was about to change. As she prepared to leave the Valdrian system, Williams received new orders that sent a chill down her spine. She was to proceed to coordinates in deep space, where she would rendezvous with other human vessels for Operation Sunburst. The coordinates were in a sector that official records listed as empty space, but Williams had a growing suspicion that humanity had been very busy in areas where other species never bothered to look. Her ship's engineer, a quiet woman named Rachel who had always seemed more interested in exotic physics than standard propulsion systems, approached Williams with a grim smile. "Captain, I've been waiting 5 years to show you what this ship can really do. With your permission, I'd like to begin modifications that will reveal our actual capabilities." Williams gave her authorization, knowing that the time for pretending to be harmless explorers was over. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of when someone pushed them too far. The asteroid field in the Tau Ceti system had been classified as a minor mining operation for the past 15 years, with human ships regularly hauling what appeared to be standard industrial materials to various colonies throughout human space. Dr. Emma Stone had visited the facility 3 times as a geological consultant, and each time she had filed reports describing routine extraction of common metals and rare earth elements. What she had never mentioned in those reports was that the asteroids had been completely hollowed out and converted into the largest military shipyard in known galactic history. When the activation signal reached Tau Ceti, the entire asteroid field suddenly came alive with activity that would have terrified any alien observer. What had appeared to be simple mining platforms began to unfold like mechanical flowers, revealing hidden weapon systems and ship construction bays that had been concealed for over a decade. The mining ships that had been moving between asteroids dropped their disguises and emerged as fully armed battlecruisers that dwarfed anything in the Confederation fleet. Commander Amy Torres had been waiting in the hidden command center for this moment since she had graduated from the Academy 8 years ago. Unlike her classmates who had been assigned to the exploration vessels that the galaxy knew about, Torres and her crew had been training for warfare on a scale that no alien species could imagine. Her flagship, the Retribution, was disguised as a massive cargo hauler, but beneath its innocent exterior lay weapons systems that violated every treaty the Confederation had ever signed. The first phase of Operation Sunburst required perfect coordination across 17 star systems simultaneously. Hidden facilities throughout human space began revealing their true nature as military installations that had been masquerading as civilian infrastructure for decades. Agricultural planets activated buried defense networks, research stations, unveiled experimental weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Even the peaceful trading posts that aliens visited regularly contained hidden armories that could supply entire battle fleets. Torres received her targeting information through channels that had been dark for years, communication networks that existed parallel to the official diplomatic frequencies that other species monitored. Her primary objective was the Nexari forward base at Kepler 442, where intelligence indicated they were preparing to launch attacks against 3 more peaceful civilizations. The base was heavily fortified and defended by what Nexari commanders considered an unbreachable fleet of warships. The journey to Kepler 442 took 6 days, during which Torres and her crew prepared for combat in ways that would have shocked their alien allies. Human military doctrine had been developed in complete secrecy, incorporating lessons learned from careful observation of every major conflict in Confederation space over the past 50 years. They had studied Draknari tactics, analyzed ethereal defensive strategies, and developed countermeasures for every known weapon system in the galaxy. When the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, the Nexari response was initially confused. Their sensors detected what appeared to be heavily armed human vessels, but their tactical computers had no data on human military capabilities beyond basic self-defense systems. The Nexari fleet commander, a veteran warrior named Korvac, who had conquered 12 worlds, sent a standard intimidation broadcast demanding that the humans retreat immediately or be destroyed. Torres's response was transmitted on all frequencies, so that every species in the galaxy would eventually hear it. This is Commander Amy Torres of the Human Defense Force. You have committed genocide against peaceful civilizations and threatened the security of inhabited worlds. Surrender immediately, or face the consequences of your actions. You have 30 seconds to comply. The Nexari fleet's reply came in the form of plasma torpedoes launched at maximum range, weapons that had never failed to destroy enemy vessels in decades of successful conquest. Torres watched the incoming fire on her tactical display and smiled grimly as her ship's true defensive systems activated for the first time in combat. The plasma torpedoes struck what appeared to be empty space 3 kilometers from the Retribution and dissipated harmlessly against force barriers that officially did not exist. What happened next would be studied by military historians across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet moved with precision that seemed impossible for organic beings, each ship coordinating its actions with split-second timing that suggested either incredible training or artificial intelligence. Assistance. The Nexari found themselves facing weapons that ignored their shields, penetrated their armor, and struck with accuracy that defied their understanding of targeting systems. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the entire Nexari fleet had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radiation. Not a single human ship reported any damage beyond minor power fluctuations. The Nexari base on Kepler 442, which had been considered one of their most secure installations, was systematically destroyed by orbital bombardment that left nothing but molten rock where fortifications had stood for decades. Throughout Confederation, space monitoring stations detected the massive energy signatures of the battle and struggled to understand what they were observing. The official reports described anomalous weapon discharges and unidentified defensive technologies, because no alien scientist could believe that humans had developed such capabilities without anyone detecting the research and development process. Ambassador Reed was in emergency session with the Confederation Council when the first reports arrived, and he watched with carefully controlled expressions as the other delegates struggled to process the information. Chancellor Mordak demanded explanations that Reed could not officially provide, while the ethereal representatives insisted that there must have been some mistake in the sensor readings. Reed stood slowly and addressed the assembly with words that would be quoted in history books across the galaxy. Honorable delegates, humanity has always believed in peaceful solutions to galactic conflicts. We have spent 50 years trying to work within Confederation protocols to maintain stability and protect innocent civilizations. Today, we discovered that some threats cannot be negotiated with or contained through diplomatic means. The silence in the Great Hall was absolute as Reed continued. The Nexari Empire has demonstrated that they view genocide as an acceptable tool of expansion. Humanity cannot and will not permit this to continue. We are formally notifying the Confederation that human forces are now actively engaged in operations to eliminate the Nexari threat by any means necessary. Councillor Vextar, the elderly Draknari who had always treated humans with condescending kindness, finally found his voice. David, what exactly are you telling us? What capabilities has your species been hiding? Reed looked directly at him and spoke with quiet certainty that carried across the chamber. Counselor, humanity has been preparing for this day since we first learned that predators like the Nexari existed. We sincerely hope that no other species will ever give us reason to demonstrate the full extent of our preparations. As news of the battle spread across Confederation space, species that had dismissed humanity for decades suddenly began reviewing everything they thought they knew about their quiet neighbors. The humans who had seemed so eager to please so willing to accept minor roles in galactic affairs, had just obliterated a fleet that could have conquered half the Confederation's member worlds. Admiral Maria Santos had spent 12 years preparing for Operation Thunderstrike, a military campaign that would either establish humanity as the galaxy's dominant power or result in the complete destruction of human civilization. Standing in the command center of the Vengeance, a ship so large that it had been constructed in the void between solar systems to avoid detection, she reviewed intelligence reports that detailed every Nexari military installation, supply depot, and command structure throughout their empire. The Nexari had ruled through fear for over 3 centuries, building their power on the simple principle that overwhelming force applied without mercy would break any opposition. Their empire stretched across 47 star systems, each one conquered through systematic destruction of local defenses, followed by the extermination of any population that might resist occupation. They had never encountered an enemy that could match their appetite for total warfare, and their recent expansion had convinced them that no such enemy existed. Santos activated the communication array that linked her ship to every human military installation in the galaxy, a network that had been built in secret parallel to the civilian infrastructure that aliens were allowed to observe. Her voice carried across light years to reach commanders who had trained their entire careers for this moment. All stations, this is Admiral Santos. Operation Thunderstrike is now active. Execute all predetermined objectives simultaneously. Show them what humans do to species that mistake our kindness for weakness. The response was immediate and coordinated across dozens of star systems as the human war machine revealed itself in its terrible entirety. Hidden shipyards that had been disguised as research stations began launching fleets that had been under construction for decades. Civilian merchant vessels dropped their camouflage and emerged as heavily armed combat platforms. Even the agricultural colonies that supplied food to half the Confederation activated buried weapon systems that could strike targets in adjacent solar systems. Captain Alex Turner commanded the assault on the Nexari stronghold at Rigel 7, a fortress world that housed the Empire's primary military academy and strategic planning center. His battle group approached the system using technology that the Nexari had never encountered, ships that could phase in and out of normal space, making them effectively invisible to conventional sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. The Nexari defenders detected the human approach when Turner's fleet materialized inside their defensive perimeter, bypassing outer defenses that had never been breached in 200 years of warfare. The fortress commander, General Thrackmore, immediately ordered maximum defensive response, launching every available fighter and activating orbital defense platforms that could reduce planets to rubble. Turner's tactical officer, Lieutenant Rebecca Moore, coordinated the assault with clinical precision that reflected years of studying Nexari military doctrine. Human forces struck every target simultaneously, using weapons that seemed to ignore the laws of physics that governed conventional warfare. Nexari shields, designed to deflect the most powerful energy weapons known to galactic science, offered no protection against devices that attacked matter at the quantum level. The battle for Rigel 7 lasted 4 hours and resulted in the complete destruction of every Nexari military asset in the system. What shocked observers throughout the galaxy was not just the speed of human victory, but the absolute thoroughness with which they eliminated enemy forces. No Nexari vessel escaped, no defensive position survived. The fortress world itself was reduced to an airless rock stripped of everything that could support military operations. Similar scenes played out across Nexari space as human forces demonstrated capabilities that redefined the meaning of overwhelming force. Admiral Santos coordinated 17 simultaneous battles from her command ship, directing operations with a level of strategic insight that suggested decades of preparation. Every human attack was timed to prevent Nexari forces from regrouping or coordinating their defense, and every victory was followed by systematic destruction of infrastructure that could support future military activities. The Nexari Emperor, Corvash the Conqueror, responded to the human assault by ordering the mobilization of his empire's reserve fleets and the activation of doomsday weapons that had been held in reserve for planetary annihilation. His message to the human fleet was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Soft mammals from the outer rim, you have signed the death warrant for your entire species. The Nexari Empire will burn your worlds to ash and scatter your bones across the void. Santos received the Emperor's threat while her forces were reducing the Nexari naval base at Alpha Centauri to constituent atoms, and her response became one of the most quoted transmissions in galactic history. Emperor Corvash, your species has built its power on the suffering of innocent civilizations. You have shown no mercy to those weaker than yourselves, and you will receive none from us. Surrender now, and we will allow your people to survive in exile. Continue this war, and we will erase every trace that the Nexari Empire ever existed. B. Emperor's reply came in the form of planet-killer weapons launched at 3 human colonies, massive devices designed to crack worlds and exterminate all life in entire solar systems. The weapons never reached their targets. Human defensive systems that had been hidden throughout space for decades intercepted and destroyed the doomsday devices with technology that seemed to bend reality itself. What followed was the systematic dismantling of Nexari civilization with efficiency that horrified every species in the galaxy. Human forces didn't just defeat Nexari fleets. They eliminated them so completely that no debris remained to study. They didn't capture Nexari worlds. They stripped them of everything that could support military operations and left them uninhabitable. Most disturbing of all, they accomplished this destruction with casualty rates that suggested either incredible luck or technological superiority that no other species had imagined possible. The final battle occurred at the Nexari homeworld, where Emperor Corvash had gathered the last remnants of his empire's military might for a desperate final stand. The planet's defensive systems had been upgraded with weapons scavenged from a dozen conquered civilizations, creating what military analysts considered the most heavily fortified world in galactic history. Admiral Santos arrived in the system, aboard a single ship, the Judgment, and broadcast one final ultimatum. Emperor Corvash, your empire is finished, your fleets are destroyed, your worlds are reduced to rubble. Surrender now, and we will allow the Nexari people to survive as refugees under Confederation protection. Force us to take your homeworld by assault, and we will ensure that no Nexari survives to trouble the galaxy again. The Emperor's response was predictable. I am Corvash the Conqueror, heir to 3 centuries of Nexari supremacy. We do not surrender to inferior species. Come and take our world if you can, soft mammals. We will show you how real warriors die. Santos activated weapons systems that had been constructed in the deepest secrecy of human space, devices that could crack the fundamental bonds between atoms and unmake matter at the subatomic level. The battle lasted 6 minutes. When it was over, the Nexari homeworld had been reduced to a cloud of elementary particles expanding slowly through space, taking with it the last remnants of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. The silence that followed across Confederation space was profound and absolute. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak now realized they had been sharing the galaxy with predators far more dangerous than the Nexari had ever been. The difference was that humans had hidden their true nature behind smiles and diplomatic courtesy, revealing their fangs only when innocent blood demanded justice. 6 months after the final destruction of the Nexari homeworld, Ambassador David Reed walked into the Confederation Assembly Hall wearing the same simple black suit he had worn for 8 years of diplomatic service. The massive chamber that had once buzzed with casual conversation and dismissive laughter now fell into complete silence as he took his seat in what was no longer called the Developing Worlds section. The other delegates, representing species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia, watched his every movement with the careful attention normally reserved for dangerous predators. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the human patrol vessel New Dawn as it conducted what appeared to be routine border surveillance along the edge of former Nexari space. Her ship looked identical to the vessels that had earned humanity its reputation as peaceful explorers, and her crew maintained the same friendly professionalism that had characterized human interactions with alien species for decades. The only visible difference was the way other ships responded when they encountered her patrol routes. They immediately changed course and departed the area with unusual haste. The transformation in galactic politics had been swift and absolute. Trade negotiations that had once taken months to complete were now resolved in humanity's favor within hours of being proposed. Territorial disputes involving human colonies were withdrawn by opposing claimants before formal hearings could be scheduled. The Draknari, who had spent centuries expanding their empire through careful intimidation and overwhelming force, found themselves offering tribute payments to maintain peaceful relations with their new human neighbors. Chancellor Mordak, whose scarred appearance had once intimidated every delegate in the assembly, now spoke with careful deference whenever addressing human concerns. The proud Draknari warrior who had casually suggested using humans as expendable labor now phrased every interaction as a request rather than a demand. When Reed proposed new shipping regulations that would benefit human trade routes, the Chancellor immediately called for a vote that passed unanimously without discussion. The ethereals, whose crystalline forms had once shimmered with arrogant confidence, now communicated through harmonic frequencies that carried undertones of deep respect and barely concealed fear. Their representatives avoided direct eye contact with Reed and phrased their diplomatic positions as suggestions that could be easily modified if humans found them unsuitable. The species that had once considered humanity intellectually inferior now sought human approval for scientific research projects and cultural exchanges. Dr. Emma Stone returned to her work as a geological consultant, visiting mineral extraction operations throughout Confederation space with the same professional competence she had always displayed. The only change in her routine was that alien facility managers now treated her with the reverence normally reserved for royalty, offering her the finest accommodations and requesting her opinions on matters far beyond her official expertise. None of them suspected that her consultation reports still contained detailed analysis of planetary defenses and strategic resources. The most profound change occurred in how other species educated their young about galactic history. The Nexari Empire, which had terrorized civilizations for 3 centuries, was now taught as a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating potential enemies. Children across dozens of worlds learned that the quiet humans who smiled and traded peacefully were the same beings who had erased an entire empire with efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. Captain Mitchell received regular communications from merchant vessels requesting safe passage through sectors that were officially open to all Confederation traffic. Ship captains who had once barely acknowledged human presence now transmitted detailed flight plans and requested permission to approach human patrol areas. The fear was not based on any hostile actions by human forces, but on the growing realization that humanity had revealed only a fraction of their true capabilities. Reed observed these changes with the same diplomatic composure he had maintained throughout his career, but his evening reports to Earth now carried a different tone. Instead of documenting alien dismissiveness and casual contempt, he described a galaxy where human interests were protected by reputation alone. Trade partners competed to offer favorable terms. Potential enemies reconsidered their aggressive policies when they remembered what had happened to the Nexari. The human military presence that had shocked the galaxy during Operation Thunderstrike had seemingly vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The massive fleets that had destroyed an empire retreated to hidden bases and resumed their disguises as civilian infrastructure. Admiral Santos and her command staff returned to their official duties as administrators of human space exploration, as if the systematic annihilation of 47 star systems had been merely a brief interruption in their peaceful scientific work. But the memory of human warfare lingered in every diplomatic exchange and trade negotiation. Species that had considered themselves the galaxy's dominant powers now carefully measured their words when addressing human representatives. The Vorthok, who had once struggled to communicate with oxygen-breathing civilizations, developed new harmonic frequencies specifically designed to convey respect and peaceful intentions to human listeners. Young Draknari warriors, raised on stories of conquest and domination, now learned that true strength sometimes hid behind peaceful appearances. Ethereal philosophers, who had spent centuries developing theories about the nature of power and civilization, found themselves revising fundamental assumptions about which species truly controlled the galaxy's destiny. Even the gas-dwelling beings of the Outer Rim, who had rarely concerned themselves with the politics of solid matter civilizations, began monitoring human activities with nervous attention. Reed's final diplomatic triumph came during a session devoted to establishing new security protocols for protecting peaceful civilizations from future threats. His proposal for a Galactic Protection Initiative was approved without debate, giving humanity official authority to intervene militarily in cases of genocide or unprovoked aggression. The other species voted enthusiastically for measures that essentially gave humans the power to police the entire galaxy. As Reed walked home through the crystal streets of Zentara Prime that evening, he passed the same monuments to galactic civilization that had always ignored humanity's contributions to Confederation society. But now he noticed new additions, small plaques and memorial stones acknowledging the peaceful resolution of the Nexari crisis and humanity's role in protecting innocent civilizations from extinction. The galaxy had found face-saving ways to honor the species they had once dismissed as harmless. That night, Reed composed his final report as humanity's representative to the Stellar Confederation. Mission accomplished. Galactic perception of human capabilities has been successfully recalibrated. Threat assessment protocols updated. Future conflicts should be preventable through reputation management alone. Humanity's true strength remains our greatest diplomatic asset. Everyone now knows we could destroy them, but we choose not to. He sealed the transmission and sent it toward Earth, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships continued their patient watch over a galaxy that had finally learned to take them seriously.